You want to say hi to the people? I bet they're wondering how big you are. Oh! Hey y'all, how's it going? Welcome back to Keep to Plate channel. This is Indiana Jones. He's our 4-month-old Basset Hound puppy. So for those of you who regularly watch this channel, he's getting huge. Yes, he still thinks I'm God's gift to Earth. Nobody knows why. And he's still incredibly needy and cuddly. But you know, there are worse things in this world than having a puppy that needs you, you know? Lord, I can't hold you this whole time, my guy. Okay, y'all, so today ended up being a very cold and windy day. I had some projects outside I was gonna film, but I think I finally decided to film this video, which I've been hesitant to film, if I'm being really honest with you. For a variety of reasons, but mostly because I think whenever you start talking about money, I think people have a lot of feelings about money, rightfully so. Money is how we get resources that we all need to like survive, right? So I think that's why I've been very hesitant to make this video. I have my laptop on the side here because I actually made like 2 full pages of notes so that I could stay on track, or else this video would be very long. But this video got spurred by a couple of things. One of them is I built my new garden last year. We bought our house, I built my new garden, and I think a lot of people wondered how much it cost me, like money cost. I will tell you that in this video, by the way. I actually kept all the receipts from my garden build last year specifically so that I could give you this information. So that's thing number 1. The other thing that spurred this video was, if you don't know, I have a corporate 9-to-5 tech job. And it's kind of a customer strategy role, and a lot of my friends also work in tech, corporate 9-to-5. And I think there's a lot more of those people out there who want to garden but don't know how to get started or don't know if they have time than a lot of what I typically see in my feeds, which are homesteaders. I know homesteaders, I have family that are homesteaders. I think homesteading's phenomenal. Is it my reality now or maybe ever? No. So I wanted to actually talk about the cost involved because we were sitting at our New Year's Eve dinner, which was with a bunch of friends, and one of my friends, he asked me, he said, "Brooke, how much does your garden like cost you on average?" Now we're talking about a bunch of corporate people who deal with numbers and spreadsheets and sales and revenue, all this stuff all day long. And sometimes I think it's hard for people who live in that world to think about cost and value and dollars and all those things and separate it from like money. So those are the 2 things that spurred this. I am gonna talk actual dollars and like practical advice, but I really wanna start this video talking about cost and value. Because I find it really interesting when somebody asks me how much my garden costs. I think about cost in a lot more terms than just money. I think about cost in my time. I think about cost in my my body and my pain, because we have all messed up our backs doing gardening. I also think about the cost of doing gardening instead of doing other things that require my time, whether it be social things or household things or stuff like that. So these are all costs. These are all things that I give so that I can do this thing. And then I think the idea of value in the garden is very important, because a lot of people, when they say, well, what do you get out of it? Like, is it worth it? That's a big one. Is it worth it? This big word. And usually when people are asking that question, they're asking if there's a return on investment and if that return on investment is positive, right? Are you getting out more than what you put in? And I think that's another thing we have to, or not we have to, you don't have to do anything. I think about value very differently, right? I think about the mental health aspect of gardening. I think about the community that I've created with gardening. I think about the peace that I have had with gardening. When my grandfather passed away last year, I took a week of bereavement and I spent almost all day, every day outside in the garden. because it was bringing me just a lot of peace. The other thing that the garden brought me was new skills. That's valuable to me. So I think it's interesting because I think when we ask about cost, value, and worth, those are all very subjective things based on who you are as a person. Because the cost that I'm going to tell you that was my garden, that might make some people pee their pants, and that might be like a drop in the bucket for some people, right? When I talk about value, somebody could be like mortally offended that I agonize for 6 months over a tomato that you could buy at the store for cents on the dollar. Except you can't, because I have feelings about that, but that's fine. So some people might think that's insane. So it's, when we're talking about cost, value, worth, those are all very subjective to who you are and your goals and who you want to be in this limited time we have on Earth, okay? So that's kind of the higher level discussion that I want to have. If you probably clicked on this video for a few reasons. Either you're a current gardener who just wants to get more information on what other people are doing. You could be an aspiring gardener who might want to see, you know, what's possible. Or you are a gardener that's wanting to expand their gardening. Or you could be here for another reason that I didn't even think about. So I think this is a good time to talk about gardening because there's been some like news articles and some stuff and some media and about like home gardening not being good for the environment or being too expensive or all this stuff. And I mean, just personally, I think it's kind of bullshit because I come from family, my mom's side of the family, who were homesteaders. They were gardeners. They grew their own food. They foraged. They did all this stuff. And so I have a value instilled in me of food and independence and sustainability that a lot of people don't have. So I recognize that I'm not the like majority here, which is why I wanted to make this video. To conclude this very long intro, there will be chapters at the bottom that will be as descriptive as possible about what each section is about. I encourage you to watch the whole video, of course. But if you're wanting to skip around, if you're wanting to just really like nail in on one certain topic, then feel free. The other thing I'm obligated to say is if you like this video, please subscribe. I actually pay for all of my gardening adventures with my YouTube revenue, and my whole entire garden last year got built and paid for by a couple of years worth of saving up my YouTube money. So without further ado, let's get into some nitty gritty. So I have my homework. I'm ready. Look at this fun little disco lady. All right. So the burning question that everybody wants to know: how much did it cost to build my garden? I built 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 8 foot by 4 foot beds, and then I built one 16 foot by 4 foot bed. There was another 16 foot by 4 foot existing bed in this backyard when we moved in. That's what was built. I'm so nervous. So in 2023, my garden cost $1,140.35 to build. And I will explain all the breakouts. So, and I'll explain everything. So for the actual beds, I did wood, and I used a weather shield wood. Now there's some arguments that weather shield wood is bad for human consumption. There are studies on studies on studies that prove that that's not true. Any weather shield coating that comes off of the wood and then makes it into the groundwater, which then uptakes into the plant, which then gets eaten by a human, is actually like not traceable in the human body because it's like it doesn't make it that far. So maybe when they were weather treating wood back in like, you know, the 80s, like 70s, 80s, that was probably toxic. The way that they do it now, it's not toxic to humans. So I did use weather shield lumber because it was a cheaper option. Cedar is kind of the like top of the line option. We'll talk about that later. Starting soil. This is where I spent the most amount of my money. Now, there are cheaper ways to do this. We will talk about it. we moved into this house in March, and I was already 2 weeks behind in my normal planting schedule. So I used a till once and never till again method. I am generally a no-till, no-dig gardener. I rented a tiller. The tiller for the half day that I had it was $69.71. Then I had a bunch of garden amendments delivered to my house, okay? Now, talk about cost, the back pain. Whoo! Oh man, I was very happy to pay the people to deliver the pallets onto my driveway so that I only had to move those bags one time and not twice. I basically did half topsoil, and I did half really high quality compost. So the topsoil plus the delivery was 32 bags. They put it on a pallet and delivered it, was $164.44. And I just got that from Home Depot. And then my local garden center, the Natural Gardener, which is like, I love that place. I love that place so much. I got expanded shale and compost blend, 16 bags for $239.20. I got Happy Frog soil conditioner for $183.60. I got 16 bags of cedar mulch for $63.20, and the delivery of all of that was $95. So that, just the soil. The soil was the absolute biggest expense that I had in starting this garden, was $1,006.35. So that's where we get to the number $1,140.35. That's how we get to that number. That is literally just the wooden beds and the soil. That is like, I had grass, now I don't have grass anymore. Now I have garden beds. That did not include the seeds that I had started. That did not include anything that I bought, anything like that. Then, because of the way we track finances in this house, every purchase that I make all year gets categorized. And so I actually have garden as like a category. So it was really easy to track how much money I spent maintaining the garden all year. And because I was still collecting things here and there, I spent about $2,000 in 2023 maintaining the garden. So all in all, we can call it was probably around $3,200 to have my backyard garden in 2023. Now, your next question is probably gonna be like, well, how many pounds of food did you grow? And how much did you eat? And blah, 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 blah. I don't keep track of that personally, because going back to the whole cost, value, worth, the value of the garden to me is far beyond the dollar amount of food that is produced. And this is where my main argument for you can never compare food that you get out of your backyard garden to food that you buy at the grocery store. It's not the same. The reason I claim that it's not the same is because the flavor won't be the same, the nutrient density won't be the same, the freshness won't be the same. They are different products, in my opinion. If you wanted something to compare it to, we actually have a service here in Austin that does farmhouse delivery, where it's basically like a CSA box that they deliver to your front door. Now, I say delivery because this is in my backyard. I literally, for the last 3.5 months, we've only been eating veg out of the garden. I walk out my back door and I pick what I want and then I come back in. That's convenience, y'all. Like, that's the convenience of like delivery. So that's why I say like farmer's market delivery, this like farmhouse delivery. Now, if you want to start comparing those two things, hi, buddy. Oh, yes. Would you like to be part of this conversation? Okay. I think this is the dog that's going to get me ready to have a child. He has a lot of feelings. So that starts to get really interesting, because then I think you could really start seeing the argument of it being worth it in terms of having a return on investment, a monetary return on investment. I think that's where that could get pretty interesting. Excuse me. Hey, I'm trying to have a serious conversation with the people, okay? This is very important. Can you not chew on the chair? Oh, you're a gremlin. You're a gremlin, I say. You're a gremlin, I say. Yeah, you gotta go now, but you're very cute. That's usually the next question after I tell them that my garden costs about $3,200 to build and maintain in 2023. This was literally the exact conversation that me and my friend had on New Year's Eve. He was kind of saying, oh my God, that's insane when I think about buying a 50-cent potato at the store. And then my rebuttal back to him was, well, the potato that I'm pulling out of my garden is not the 50-cent potato you're buying at the store. And then you get into that whole conversation, right? Which goes back to subjective values and worth and all that good stuff. So just to kind of finish out talking about my garden specifically, there's a few key areas that are the most expensive in maintaining my garden. The biggest one is amendments. I like to amend my garden before every season. Now here we have kind of three main seasons. We have spring, obviously. We have spring, early summer, late summer here. Not a good time to grow literally anything. You have fall and then winter. So you have three main seasons. And because it's a lot of garden, I end up spending probably around $200 in amendments every time I amend my bed. That's a lot of money. Mulch is less expensive, so I didn't put mulch as like, you know, a big investment. But really amendments are the biggest investment I make in my garden. And so one thing I'm doing to try and tackle that is trying to get way more into composting. I actually think for my spring garden, this is gonna be the first time I'm going to have like homemade compost that I've been brewing for probably like 6 months. This is the first time I'm actually going to be able to like close that loop, and hopefully I can get myself in kind of a system, because that's one of the biggest costs of my garden right now. Another one is seeds. I actually didn't buy many seeds at all this year. I really challenged myself to like use the seeds you have, don't get all excited. I probably have a seed collection that's worth a couple $100, which like a seed packet costs $2 or $3. So like it's a lot of seeds. And I really want to try to do some seed saving this year, especially tomatoes, cucumbers. So that's kind of a key area that I would like to focus in on this year as well, to kind of save some money. Another one is water. So water's always going to be a big expense, especially depending on where you live. I live in Central Texas. If we have a really wet spring, which hopefully this year we will. If we have a really wet spring, then generally your water costs are going to be less. Last year we had a very dry spring. And then summer's always going to get you. Buddy, Indy, puppy. Thank you. Yes. He has short legs like his mom, and he's thick with 2 C's. Yeah. Okay, so moving past me and all of my situation, okay? I want to talk about a few things. This is how I think about building gardens, okay? It's in 3 parts. Remember I said chapters, okay? I think about infrastructure, okay? That's first. I think about soil, and I think about plants. So first we're gonna talk about infrastructure, because this is probably the first thing that you should be thinking about when you're building your garden. I think I need to give you something to entertain you. All the dogs got antler bones, so I think we'll be able to get through this now. All right, now, there's probably way more to all of these subjects than you're gonna hear, and that just comes out of my brain. So if you would like to share some wisdom, please leave a comment. Just remember to be respectful. So, infrastructure. There's 2 basic ways of garden beds, okay? You can use wood, which is what I did, or you can use metal, okay? Like the big metal beds. I have both. I have one metal bed that I was given for free to do a promo a couple of years ago, and then I have my wooden beds. Now, wood varies in quality, right? I got Weather Shield, it'll last a while. It doesn't look the best. Like a really nice cedar would be chef's kiss, but that is very expensive. And in terms of the metal beds are expensive. So we'll go through some pros and cons. So for wood, wood is cheaper. It looks more natural in my opinion. I don't know that I would love the look of all metal beds. That's just a touch modern for me, if you will. Some people love it. I'm not saying either one is good or bad, just not my thing. The wooden raised beds are really good for in-ground gardening. Now I always get asked when I talk to a stranger about gardening, well, do you use beds, or what do you do? I'm always very confused by that question, because yeah, technically I have guardrails, but like they're only 6 inches off the ground. So I just say I'm an in-ground gardener. So wooden raised beds are really good for in-ground gardeners. They're also easier to take apart if you plan to move. So I made some garden beds at my rental house. That was a while ago in the videos. If you're an OG, you know. But they're easy to take apart. I literally just took mine apart, trashed the wood when I had to move out of my rental house. Now metal raised beds, they're expensive. I'm not gonna lie to you. They are expensive, but they're very long lasting. They're also really good for tall people. I'm 5 feet tall. I'm not one of those tall people. It's just not a thing. Or they're really good for folks with back pain. So folks with back pain, or if you are disabled and you need that higher bed, great option. They're much more permanent, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on your living situation. And then they can be expensive to fill. Now there's 1,001 videos on YouTube about how to fill raised beds cheaply. I highly encourage you to do it. Now, if you're gonna go balls to the walls and buy like 10 of them, there's no way you can do that cheaply. If you're gonna kind of go 1 or 2 at a time, you could probably build over time. Another point about infrastructure is irrigation. So really 2 main options, not to get overly complicated. You have hand watering, AKA you with a hose, or drip irrigation. Now drip irrigation can go from pre-built drip systems that like hook into your hose, all the way up to things that hook into your irrigation line, that have an app that you can control, all this stuff, right? Hand watering, I think there's just one way you do that, with a hose in your hand. So, pros to hand watering. I'm a hand watering person. I don't know how much longer I will be because we have a lot of garden space. And right now I have the time to go out there when I need to water and water every other day if that's what it takes. But as my life and my family grows, I don't know that I'm gonna continue to have, you know, a 40-minute block in the morning to go water. We'll see, I don't know. So hand watering is time consuming, but it's very exact. If I have a place in my garden that doesn't need water, I don't water it, right? So it's highly efficient in that regard. And the other thing is you can have mixed water need plants in one space. So let me kind of break that down. So for example, I will put tomatoes in the middle of my bed and then I'll line the outside with peppers. Now peppers don't need as much water. They're much more drought tolerant. Tomatoes need to be watered very deeply, maybe like twice a week, okay? A stressed tomato plant makes a tasty tomato, which is like a little fucked up. So with those 2 mixed water needs, if I had it all on one drip system, there are some drip systems where you can control that, but your general run-of-the-mill drip system, the whole bed is gonna get the same amount of water at the same cadence, blah, blah, blah. Now with hand watering, I can put water at the base of my tomato plants for way longer than I put water at the base of my pepper plants. So that's kind of what I mean when I say you can intermix plants that have mixed watering needs, whereas with drip, you have to be a lot more careful with that. Now, let's talk about drip irrigation. This is something I've done a decent amount of research on because we're considering doing it. Okay. Mostly because I found out we had an irrigation system that basically ran along where our garden beds are around the fence because I poked it with a stake and busted it. So, drip irrigation, really great for efficiency depending on your climate. So depending on your climate, it can be a very efficient way to water. When I say depending on your climate, we have really hot and dry summers. We end up in a drought every summer. It's a thing. I don't know why everybody still acts surprised, but we end up in a drought every summer. And because our soil is mostly clay, when clay starts to dry out, it doesn't matter if you like water the top of it. By that time, the roots are pretty far down and they're gonna start getting locked up unless you can like basically just dump water into the roots, right? So it really depends on your climate if drip irrigation is even gonna make sense for you. There are some places that like it rains on a frequent enough cadence that drip irrigation doesn't even make sense. So drip irrigation is something that you really have to think about, and you really have to consider. It's a big investment in terms of getting it set up time-wise and money-wise, depending on how big your gardens are, but it could be worth it. Again, we're kind of considering it, but we'll see. Excuse me, who's getting mad at who? Just, it's just like little brother shit. Now, the last thing in terms of infrastructure is trellising, okay? Now, if you're a newer gardener, the only thing that trellising means is vertical stuff for plants to climb on, okay? Whether they're vining plants, or honestly, I did a tomato on an arch trellis last year. So much fun. So much fun. Y'all need to start acting right. So there's really again, I broke it down into the two main concepts for trellising. Now you have your kind of T-post and livestock panel trellis, right? That's what I use, that's what I've used for a long time. It's pretty cheap and effective. It's not pretty when it's not covered and stuff, right? It's not pretty. But it can also be moved around really easily. So if for some reason I decided I didn't want that arch there, or for some reason I decided I wanted something else somewhere else, I could just pick up the T-post out of the ground, put it there. This 25-pound dog won't mess with the 120-pound Great Dane, but will mess with the 75-pound Boxer Pit. This is why they call them bass holes. Basset hounds, bass holes. This is why. All right, the next section. Now, I probably scared a lot of you when I said that soil and amendments were my biggest kind of cost, right? I think this is the one that kind of gets people caught off guard because at least when I first started gardening back in apartments forever ago, I remember having a conversation with my sister where she was like, what kind of soil are you gonna use? And I was like, it's dirt. Dirt's dirt. And let me tell you, dirt is not dirt. There's good dirt and there's bad dirt. And there's like, okay dirt. So soil and amendments are a very important part of gardening, especially if you're wanting to kind of invest in your soil, right? For long term. Now, there's tilling, there's no-dig. Do your own research on this stuff, guys. Like, don't let some lady on the internet like tell you what to do and have that be like your Bible forever, okay? After all the research, I mostly go on a no-dig mentality, okay? That's how I manage my soil. It does very well for me, okay? Conventional farming usually uses a lot of tilling, okay? That's kind of the way that they farm. A lot of people farm. So with tilling and no-dig, there's kind of two different schools of thought. So when you're talking about no-dig, you're talking about building soil health with compost, with worm castings, with all of these things that typically you have to buy, right? Unless you're like making them, which a lot of people do. Now, with tilling, typically when you're tilling, your soil only has a certain amount of nutrition in it. And every time you plant, you're taking money out of that nutrition bank, okay? So after a few seasons, there's not gonna be any nutrition left in your soil unless you put something back in. You gotta put a deposit in to take it out, right? So if you're constantly tilling and you're not necessarily soil building, you're gonna need to use a lot of fertilizer, right? Okay. So the way I look at it, you're either gonna spend your money on fertilizer and tilling, or you're going to spend your money on soil amendments. One of them is really good for the soil, one of them is not so good for the soil, okay? I would rather feed the soil and let the soil feed my plants than ignore the soil just as like a medium to grow in and just feed my plants fertilizer. But again, highly encourage you to do your own research in that, okay? So, mulch, okay? I'm a big advocate of mulch, whatever kind of mulch you like. Mulch is just a way to keep in moisture, build soil health, protect the roots. It keeps the temperature of the soil down. Now, I will say, not all mulch is created equal, okay? Everybody has their favorites, depending on your climate, all this stuff. I typically go for a slightly decomposed hardwood mulch. I used to use cedar mulch, but it turns out my fiance is incredibly allergic to cedar. So literally, if I use cedar mulch, he like can't go in the backyard for like until it rains, and it like tamps down all the cedar smell. So I use a non-dyed decomposed hardwood mulch. I've used straw before, not my favorite. I'm very intrigued by pine needles. Doesn't really seem like a great soil builder to me, but I need to do a little more research. So there are lots of types of mulch, okay? As long as just please don't use dyed mulch, please. Please, pretty please for me, thanks. Now, the next thing is to amend to your region. Okay, there's lots of information out there about soil science and your region. We have pretty hard clay soil here, so I amend with a lot of shale and gypsum and things that are going to kind of break up that hard clay soil. I'll actually be doing a video pretty soon about soil specifically and how I took my hard clay soil to this like beautiful garden soil in just a year and exactly how I did that. So if you have clay soil and you're looking for some help or some advice, keep an eye out for that. All right, now the thing that everybody probably really wants to talk about, which is the plants. We've talked about a lot of other things that aren't plants, but really we're all here for the plants. So in terms of plants, you can buy starts from the garden center, or you can start your own seeds. Now, starting your own seeds is a decent upfront cost. You have to buy seed starting supplies, whether you choose to soil block or use plastic seed starting trays. I'm a plastic seed starting girly. Okay, you can pry it from my cold dead hands. Thanks. So whether you choose to go either way, you're still spending money to get started, right? However, if you get really high quality stuff, it will pay off over time. I'm a big fan of the Epic 6-cell trays. They are like I'm a pretty rough person on my stuff, right? These things could survive like a freaking hurricane, I swear. If they can survive me, you'll be fine. So with seed starting supplies, you need your trays, you need your bottom watering trays, you need your lights, you need your heat mats. There's a lot of supplies to get started. But once you get started, you have that stuff, right? And as long as you take care of it, you'll have it for quite a few years. Now, the other thing is buying seeds, right? Buying seeds, especially if you love variety, isn't gonna be cheap. I'm just gonna be honest with you. And the reason I say that purchasing seeds is not cheap is because pre-COVID, purchasing seeds was like, I mean, not that expensive. You had your more expensive companies, but in general, purchasing seeds was not out of the realm. Post-COVID, it's gotten a little more expensive. And listen, I'm all here for seed companies making more money. I think it means that they're highly valued, which I really appreciate. You can find cheap seeds. You can go to the dollar store, you can find them. But being a pre-COVID gardener, seed prices have just gone up. And that's okay, that's fine. But it's going to be more expensive than you think it is. However, if you are smart with how many seeds you start, right, and you don't overdo it, you will have those seeds, that one packet of seeds for years. So starting your own seeds is great. That's the majority of what I do. However, buying starts isn't bad. One of our best friends, actually Cam's cousin and his wife, they planted their garden when she was like 2 weeks away from giving birth. They went and bought all of their starts. Like, come on, right? Like, she's a doctor. And she's about to have a baby. She does not have time, okay? Like, she just doesn't. So they went and bought all their starts. Buying your starts is not, I think there's this weird internet garden culture where it's like become this like, oh, well, you must not like really be gardening because you're buying your starts. That's dumb. That's dumb, okay? If you're buying your starts and that's how you want to garden, I think that's great. I still do it. I still do it all the time. I will realize that I forgot to start something, or there's a local gal here that does a plant sale like multiple times a year out of her backyard. I always go get stuff from her because like she's got amazing stuff. So I do this. It's, if you have a massive garden and you're buying every single one of your plants, like I grew 30 determinate tomato plants last year. That would be unreasonable to buy all of those determinate tomato plants. So if you have a big garden and you're gonna go out and buy 30 determinate tomato plants, then buying starts might not be your most effective option. However, if you have a small garden, buying and it's gonna save you stress and like upfront cost of starting seeds. Y'all just buy the starts. Just buy them. Have fun. Gardening is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be stressful, okay? Now, that's like starting seeds and buying starts, all right? 2 more categories, perennial plants. Indy's having air jail time. So, in terms of your perennials, I'm talking about your berry bushes, bay leaves, rosemary, depending on where you're at. There's some of these plants that are gonna be perennial where they're gonna come back and they're gonna get bigger and better every year, and they're going to continue to serve you year over year. Perennials are great investments. I am actually redoing my perennial investment of blackberries. Lana came to visit her brother in air jail. I'm actually redoing my blackberry hedge in the back, and I'm going to be talking about that. I lost quite a few blackberry plants because I did not set them up correctly from an infrastructure perspective. Now, the other thing about perennials to keep note of is making sure you're picking the right ones for your area. One of our dear friends got us a blueberry plant a couple of years ago, not knowing that blueberries don't do super great here and that they need to have multiple blueberries to like make a blueberry. Well, it turns out the blueberry actually died last summer, and I don't intend on replacing it because blueberries need really acidic soil. We just don't have the right environment for blueberries here. We have an environment much more suited to blackberries. Same thing with raspberries. We don't do raspberries very well here in Central Texas. They would require a lot of TLC that for me isn't really worth the time. But perennials are a great way to get things established in your garden that are going to come back and give you food year after year after year. Now, the other thing in plants, especially if you're talking about homesteading and having like a small suburban homestead, is an orchard. So trees. Trees are a really big investment. Now, the way that I created my orchard was to collect the trees over time. I got them when they were really small. They were like $25, and I put them in pots on my patio. You're still in jail. I put them in pots on my patio, and I grew them for a couple of years in pots before we bought this house, and then I put them in the ground. If you were to buy all of the trees that I have in my backyard right now at the current size that they are, you'd be looking at about $500 worth of fruit trees, and you still wouldn't get fruit off of them because they would be having transplant shock and all this stuff. So trees are a great investment in the long run, like amazing. I'm literally staring at one of my peach trees right now. It's a Tropic Beauty peach. It is covered in blossoms, like covered, right? So we're gonna get a decent amount of fruit off of it in the years to come. Great investment, great investment. Gonna take a while to pay off. Which is fine, which is okay. That doesn't mean it's bad. Now that I've probably thoroughly scared you out of gardening, let's talk about some low-cost ways to start your gardening journey. And a lot of these kind of fall in line with how my gardening journey unfolded over like a matter of, I don't know, like 7 years. So the first thing, I just started with some herbs in a pot on the balcony of my apartment, okay? Like, you can just start really small, and if you're in a house, just get a terracotta pot, put some herbs in it, like see if it's something you enjoy. Then the next step of graduation is I got involved in a really low cost community garden, okay? It was $50 for the year for my little 10-foot by 20-foot plot. And I gardened in ground, and they had all the tools that I needed. We even had a composting system so I could take compost sometimes. So that was another really low cost way to get started, was being part of a community garden and in-ground gardening, okay? No dig and no till gardening is also a really low cost way to get started. I'm gonna do a video on no dig and no till in the back. But you're literally talking about cardboard, compost, mulch. Nothing fancy, okay? And then I would really recommend, if you're trying to get started low cost, just go one bed at a time. Now Cooper's coming to complain to Mom that his little brother's being annoying. Maybe you should just play with it. Lana, what do you have? Lana, hey! Oh, you bitch! Did you just steal a seed potato? You bitch! Lana, that was bad. Would you like to tell the people what you did? Yeah? Did you steal a seed potato that was scabbing over so you could eat it? You stole it right off of the counter? Is that what you did? You did? Oh my God, what? Okay, my next low cost way to get started is to just do one raised bed at a time. I was insane and I built all these raised beds at one time because I already knew that I loved gardening and that it was something that I really wanted to be part of my everyday life. And so I just went for it. But if you're wanting to kind of dip a toe in instead of like, you know, diving in head first, I would highly recommend just one bed at a time. That's how a lot of people get started, whether it's a wooden bed or a metal bed. The last thing is grow bags. So grow bags are something I have mixed feelings about. I've used them a decent amount and it's not my favorite thing to do, but you can certainly do it. It's a good way to get started. They just require a lot of water and a lot of maintenance, especially if you're in a pretty hot and dry environment. They also require fertilizers because you don't have a soil microbiome that is taking care of your plants. So there you have it, folks. This is the video I've been wanting to put together for a long time, what it actually costs to start a garden. Please just remember, there are 1,000,001 ways to get started gardening. There's so many methods. Go get your... What did you guys do? Why did he just cry? Oh, now everybody's upset. Now everybody's here. What did you do? Were you a little too rough? Were you a little too rough with him? Well, he's coming back for more, so it must not have been that bad. Yeah, now he's upset because he thinks he hurt him, except he didn't actually hurt him. The baby's just being a little bit of a wussy. Now our old man's upset. The puppy just is still trying to get at him. I think everybody's gonna have to go outside here. There are 1,000,001 ways to garden, okay? No way is right or wrong. They're all just really different. So do your research, figure out what way works for you, and whatever you end up doing, please, please try to garden. As small as you can, as big as you can. If it's something that speaks to you, please try to find a way to do it. So, thanks so much for watching. Happy gardening, and we'll see you next time.